Chess YouTube, welcome back. This video right here is not clickbait. This is the original game that Daniel Naroditsky played versus Vladimir Kramnik a year ago, where Vladimir got beat so bad by Daniel, he actually accused Daniel of cheating in the game, and ever since then, he's continued to do so. Now, in this video, we're breaking down the entire game move by move with very deep computer analysis. I'm going to show you once and for all my opinion on did Daniel cheat in this game, or is Vladimir simply a sore loser, and has he lost his mind recently? Now let's dive right in. In the game, Vladimir playing as white here, opens 1e4, and Daniel does go, let's see, 1e4, and Daniel does go 1c5, the Sicilian defense. We have knight f3, d6, d4, open Sicilian, so far so good. C takes, knight f6, pressures e4, knight c3, defends the pawn on e4, and finally a6. Now, this right here is the notorious Najdorf Sicilian, one of the strongest and most theoretical openings in chess, Daniel being a massive specialist and expert in this line from Black's point of view, but it is a very, very complicated line, maybe the most complicated opening in all of chess, because White here has a million options. The main lines include bishop e3, bishop g5, f3, h3, and so on, but there are just so many lines here. Now, in the game, Vladimir plays the move bishop c4, the so-called Fischer-Sozin variation. Bobby Fischer himself was a big fan of this line, and the idea is the bishop on c4 lines up with the pawn on f7 and exerts a ton of pressure on this diagonal. From here, Black goes e6, trying to blunt the bishop, the main line, and now we have the move bishop e3 from Vladimir. Now, this move here is pretty rare. Typically here, White's going to go bishop b3, going back out of the way of a future b5 advance, or White will castle. Now, bishop e3 is very, very interesting. White may be flirting with the idea of castling long in this game. All right, Daniel, b5, a standard idea. You push back the bishop, bishop b3, and from there, at some point, you can go, for example, bishop b7, or even b4, pushing back this knight. Now, in this position, technically, Daniel has the chance to win a pawn in the center of the board, that being the e4 pawn. All you have to do is b4, push away this knight, and then take on e4. Now, it turns out that is not the best idea right here. It turns out White gets tremendous compensation for that pawn. For example, b4, knight a4, knight takes, castles, and despite being down a pawn, White's attacking position here is so good. He has 4 pieces out versus the 1 of Black, and White's already castled. White's setup here is so good, Black is just, in a world of troubles. Therefore, instead, Daniel, in the game, he does not go b4. Instead, the move here is queen to c7. Now, c7 is typically the best square for the queen in a lot of different variations of the Sicilian, including the Najdorf. So, very standard idea. Now, here Vladimir plays a move that, to me, is quite surprising. The move is f3. Now, this move here is very typical in so many different lines of the Sicilian defense: the Dragon Sicilian, the Najdorf, the Taimanov, and so on. The idea is you defend e4 with the pawn, and you also prepare the idea of g4, g5, attacking on the king side. Now, this move is pretty rare in this bishop c4 line in general, but it can be played, and it turns out it is quite strong in this exact position. Now, Daniel, he's unfazed. Bishop e7 is the move, setting up short castling. And now Vladimir, sure enough, g4 is the move in this game, launching the attack on the king side. Now, so far, everything is pretty standard in this game. There's no weird computer ideas so far. It is computer prep in general, but so far, no real crazy ideas played in this game. Now here, Daniel plays the very strong move on move 10 that is simply b4, pushing back this knight on c3. Now, where does it want to go? It can go to a4, or it can go to e2. Now, the benefit of a4 is the knight would be closer to the queen side, where it could defend the white king if it castles long. Now, on the other hand, e2 is also a good square where it can go to, say, g3 or f4 later in the game, putting pressure on the black king side. Now, in the game, knight c to e2 was chosen by Vladimir, a good move. And now Daniel, how should he proceed right here? Well, in the game, he plays the move h6, which, to be honest, is a very, very typical idea in these lines, in these f3, g4 style lines from White. Now, to be honest though, according to the engine, this was a massive mistake in this position, which is kind of shocking. It's very standard, but instead, short castling was actually far superior. So Daniel not finding the best line here as Black, the best computer stockfish line. So, h6, and now Vladimir, Somehow he finds the right idea here. Personally, I thought, for example, queen d2 and long castles would obviously be the right move here, but instead, c3 is played, and this turns out to be the top engine line by Vladimir. Go figure. The idea being, you're breaking on the queen side, and you want to go rook c1, putting pressure on the black queen on c7. In the game, Daniel here, he takes on c3, and Vladimir, knight takes c3, taking back with the knight. But now the big question, where is the white king going to castle in this game? Honestly, I'm not so sure. I mean, the queen side is exposed, but so is the king side. And obviously, you can't stay here on e1, so the king's going to have a very tough time finding a good square to go to. All right, Daniel. In this position, he plays the 5th best line, knight bd7, which is a very typical idea in these lines, but it turns out this is a slightly dubious idea. There were several other moves here that were better according to Stockfish, including bishop d7, queen b7, knight fd7, and castles, but Daniel instead knight bd7. So far, I don't really know why Kramnik thought he cheated in this game. So far, white is just outplaying black, but let's see what happens in this game. All right, Vladimir, rook c1. The rook slides over, pressures the queen on c7 via the x-ray attack, and Daniel, he sees this, knight c5, blocks the attack, and puts some pressure on the bishop on the b3 square, and also supports e6, which could be an important square later in the game. For example, white here technically was threatening some sort of sacrifice, potentially knight takes or bishop takes on e6. Therefore, knight c5 does defend with the knight, also the bishop on c8, a good move overall. Now here, Vladimir, he continues finding the best computer lines. Bishop a4 hits the king on e8, and the idea is, yes, the bishop is hanging. However, if you take it, not hanging, but vulnerable, but yes, if you take it, then the knight could move anywhere. Take on a4, d5, b5, with the discovered attack by the rook on the queen. Daniel, he sees this, he knows this. Instead, bishop d7 is the move blocking the attack. Vladimir, he takes on d7, black takes back, and then Vladimir plays the very strong move here, b4, gaining space, pushing back this knight, and just overall putting a lot of pressure on black all over the board. His kingside pawns are launching, his queenside pawns are launching. Again, where is the white king going to go in this game? And Vladimir so far finding literally move by move every single top Stockfish line in this game. Very interesting, Vladimir. All right, knight b7. The knight retreats, and finally a mistake by Vladimir. He plays the move a4, which does make a lot of sense. You want to gain space on the queen side, but it turns out this move right here was simply too weakening. Instead, moves like a3, supporting b4, or knight to a4, even better, threatening knight b6 with the fork on the rook and the queen, would have been significantly stronger in this game. Instead, a4 played here by Vladimir, and both sides do castle kingside. We have castles and then castles. So Vladimir here deciding ultimately to castle on the king side, despite having the pawn on g4, which doesn't make a lot of sense, but that's where we're at in this game. All right, Daniel, rook fc8, a logical move, putting the rook on the open c file. And Vladimir, queen to e2, getting the queen off the back rank and connecting those rooks. And so far is still overall a pretty even game. Daniel may be a little bit better, but it's really anyone's game so far. All right, Daniel, rook c7. The idea being doubling rooks up on the c-file. Rook a to c8 could be coming next, but missing the stronger idea of d5, which would open the game to his benefit. The idea being, for example, d5, and if e takes, bishop takes b4 might be the way to go. Instead, rook c7 played in the game. And now Vladimir, b5, gaining space on the queen side, potentially threatening, I don't know, b takes or b6 ideas from white. Now here, black takes on b5. We have a takes, then knight takes, and then finally rook c to c8. Then the rook was under attack, therefore it does go back to the c8 square. Now Vladimir, rook fd1, again lining up the rook with the queen on d7, a very typical idea in a variety of openings and middle games. And now here Daniel plays a very curious move. Not a move I expected, but let's see what it is. Knight to e8, dropping back with this knight. The idea being potentially guarding c7, potentially intending knight c7 himself, which, okay, it's interesting. And also beyond that, getting out of the way of a future, for example, f4, g5 attack on the king side by white. So, knight e8, interesting. And now here, Vladimir, bishop d4. What is the idea behind this? Well, you do support this knight on c3, and you do pressure g7 a little bit, but it turns out this is a little bit dubious, and there were some stronger computer ideas, to be fair, like knight a7, intending bishop b6 was stronger, and so on, but instead, bishop d4 played in the game. Now here, Daniel, knight a5 is the move. Eyeing c4 with the knight, a solid idea. We have queen to a2, sliding over with the queen, defending a4 a little bit more. And now bishop g5, flying out with the bishop. And this, of course, being another idea of knight e8. The bishop now infiltrates on these weakened dark squares, which were weakened by moves like f3 and g4 earlier in the game. And to be honest, it is a pretty typical, pretty standard idea in the Najdorf in general. So nothing too shocking so far. All right, rook b1. The rook slides over, and then we have knight c4, infiltrating on c4 with the knight. Now queen d2, the queen slides over, maintains some pressure on that knight. And Vladimir here kind of going back and forth with his pieces. He's starting to struggle to find a good plan in this game. And Daniel, bishop f4. The bishop slides up one more square, pressures h2, and prepares ideas like, I don't know, e5, g5, and so on. Daniel finding a good way to kind of get a lockdown on these dark squares in this game. All right, Vladimir, bishop f2. He retreats. He's starting to play very defensively. Queen a2 to e2, bishop e3 to d4 to f2. Vladimir sort of losing the thread of this position, is kind of failing to find a productive plan here as white. All right, Daniel, queen to e7. The queen slides over, eyeing g5 and h4 and f6. A pretty solid idea. Now, Vladimir, rook d4. The rook slides up, pressures c4, and now we have knight to e5. All of Daniel's pieces here working in unison. The rook eyeing c3, the rook eyeing a4, the knight on e5, a very good square. The queen and the bishop eyeing all of these weak dark squares in this game. I mean, Daniel really turning up the heat so far. All right, bishop g3. Vladimir feeling the pressure, trying to offer a trade of pieces, but Daniel, queen to f6, defending with the queen, maintaining the lockdown on these dark squares. He knows if you take on g3, white takes back, and suddenly h4 and f4 are being covered, and that would be to white's benefit. Instead, queen to f6 played here by Daniel. Now, king g2, the king marches up, and now we have knight g6. The knight also eyeing these weak dark squares. And of course now, white cannot take on f4, as that would lose the queen on the spot to the fork. Therefore, instead, right here, knight g6, and then here, Vladimir plays a massive, massive mistake. Rook b to d1, sliding over the rook, but it turns out everything is just too vulnerable here, and instead, rook d3 was required to maintain defense of c3 and also get the rook out of the way of bishop e5, which would hit the rook and the knight. And now here, after rook b d1, after the massive, massive mistake by Vladimir, oh boy, Daniel, bishop e5 is the move, pressuring the rook, pressuring the knight. This is where things really go downhill for Vladimir. All right, queen d3. The queen slides up. Of course, if you move the rook, there's just too much pressure on c3 right there. For example, rook d3, bishop takes, you lose the piece and the game. Instead, queen to e3. Vladimir saying, you know what, I'd rather lose the exchange, lose the rook, than lose an entire piece. All right, from here, Daniel, he takes on d4. Not a shocking move, to say the least. And Vladimir, he takes back. Rook takes d4 is the move. And now Daniel, rook c6. The rook slides down, defends the very vulnerable d6 pawn. And now we have f4. White gaining space on the king's side. All right, Daniel, rook a to c8, piling up pressure on c3. A very logical, human-looking idea, if you ask me personally, but that's just my opinion. Now, e5, gaining space, hits the queen, hits d6. Vladimir here trying to do anything he can to turn the tides in this game and get some sort of an attack going, which, by the way, is a very good practical idea. When you're behind, if you can find some way to complicate the game and get some sort of an attack going, it's usually a good idea to try and force a mistake from the opponents. From here, we have d takes, f takes, the queen on f6 still under attack, and what does Daniel do? Simply queen to e7, sliding back with the queen, a logical move. Now we have knight e4, Vladimir jumping in, eyeing d6 with the knight, which would be a pretty solid idea. If he can get one knight to d6, he may have some fighting chances, as that knight would be an octopus and be a very strong piece. All right, black. Rook c2, flying down with the rook, hits the king. Again, a very typical human move. No foul play there. King to h3, the king slides over. Now, knight c7, offering a trade of pieces. Vladimir, he declines. Knight e, d6 is the move. Now, rook b8, pressures b5. Queen d3 defends b5. Rook c5, pressuring that piece yet again on b5. And Vladimir, now the move is knight to e4, dropping back and pressuring the rook. Now here, we have knight takes b5. Rook d7 hits the queen. And finally here, in this position, this is the move right here that sent Vladimir off the deep end for literally the past year, accusing Daniel of cheating. You know what? Pause the video and see if you can find the move right here for Daniel. It is a bit of a shocker, but honestly, it's not that complicated if we're being honest. All right, Daniel here. The move, he ignores the attack from the rook and plays the move. Well, not ignores it, but he bypasses it. He plays the move. Queen to h4. Oh boy, what's the idea? The king can't take, the queen is offended by the knight. And if the bishop takes, you lose control of f4, the knight swoops in, wins back the queen, and heads into an endgame. So it's a queen sack, but it's not that complicated of an idea. It's a two-move idea. Queen to h4, bishop takes, knight f4. I mean, you know, nothing that crazy. A 1,000 ELO player could find this move if they had enough time. Nothing super shocking. So here, Vladimir, he takes the queen. Daniel, knight f4, the king moves and takes on d3. That right there is the move that sent Vladimir off the deep end. Now, what do you guys think about that? Is that like a cheating move, or is that a 1,000 ELO puzzle that any 1,000 ELO player could find if they had enough time? I mean, I'll let you decide. I'll give my thoughts at the end, but let's keep going. Queen h4, bishop takes, knight f4, king moves, knight takes. Now here we have an endgame where Daniel is up, let's see, a lot of material actually, up the entire rook temporarily. Of course, the knight under attack. Let's see what happens. All right. Rook takes d3 is the move. Rook takes e5, hits the knight on e4, ignoring the attack on b5. And this is a very strong move by Daniel. Now, king to f4, hits the rook, defends e4. Rook d5 offers the trade of rooks, and again ignores the defense of the knight on b5. The idea being, if you trade rooks, then e takes d5, hits the knight on e4 again with tempo, and therefore Daniel will not lose a piece if white takes on b5. Daniel captures on e4. It's a Hakuna Matata, a piece for a piece. Now, rook b3, rook slides over and pins this knight on b5 to the rook on b8. If you move the knight, you lose the rook on b8. Instead, g5 check is the move. More complications, forking the king and the bishop. White takes, black takes back, hits the king with check, the knight takes, and now here, rook d4, hits the king. King g3, the king slides back, and finally rook takes a4. And in this position, Vladimir, he taps out on time, but keep in mind, black here is literally up an entire rook. It was not close. The computer says minus 4.97, minus 5, minus a whole rook. Daniel was going to win this game no matter what, so there's no timer issue here. So let's rewind. This is the move that sent Vladimir off the deep end. Literally, this move right here, which it's a good move. Don't get me wrong. It's a fantastic move, but is this really like worthy of accusing someone of cheating for an entire year? Queen to h4, a simple two-move idea, a deflection sacrifice. I mean, this could literally be in a 1,000 ELO puzzle set. Queen h4, bishop takes, knight f4. It doesn't even win material. You're just trading queens. Like, that's it. Chess YouTube. That is it. And keep in mind, Vladimir, earlier in the game, was the one playing, like, computer idea after computer idea, g4, then somehow, you know, c3, opening the queen side with g4 included. Then, you know, bishop a4 and the b4 idea. You know, I mean, Vladimir here playing the top engine lines out of the opening. I'm not accusing anyone of anything. I'm just saying, out of the opening middle game, I mean, Vladimir here was playing, like, significantly stronger, and he sort of just lost the thread in the middle game. And then queen to h4 was not exactly that shocking of an idea. A simple 2-move deflection combination that any 1000 ELO player could find with enough time. So what are my thoughts about this? Vladimir has lost his mind. I don't see any foul play from either side in this game. If anything, Vladimir was playing the top engine lines in the opening phase of the game, not accusing. I mean, they weren't that crazy moves, but I don't see why Vladimir would accuse Daniel from this game right here. It makes absolutely no sense to me. To me, neither side cheated here. It's just a simple game of chess where Vladimir got outplayed, and that's it. But anyways, what are your thoughts about this cheating scandal game from 1 year ago between Daniel and Vladimir? Let me know down below in the comments. Would love to hear your thoughts. I will try my best to respond to all comments in this thread, given that it's this video, given that it is an important one. And by the way, real fast, if you want to learn from me directly, one-on-one, how to improve your chess very, very fast, how to improve it so fast it feels illegal, I am offering a new one-on-one coaching program. Link is down below in the pinned comment and the description for this video. If that doesn't interest you, I do also have a free chess community. Links also down below there as well. So that's all I got for today, and I'll see you in the next video.